It's Friday, December 5th, 2025. Do we have some answers on the January 5th, 2021 alleged pipe bomber? Also, Ask or Tell Me Anything in a Friday 5-pack. It's coming up next on the AM Update. Well, thank you for joining me another week on the AM Update. Privileged to have each and every one of you along for the ride once again. Coming up today, Friday 5-pack and Ask or Tell Me Anything. Big news yesterday, interesting news. For years, of course, the person who planted allegedly pipe bombs at the Republican and Democratic National Party headquarters on January 5th of 2021 has eluded the headlines. On Thursday, however, federal investigators announced a major breakthrough. Brian Cole Jr., a 30-year-old from Virginia, was arrested and charged with transporting an explosive device and attempted malicious destruction by means of explosive materials. Attorney General Pam Bondi credited investigators and prosecutors for sifting through evidence that had been sitting at the FBI. There were no new tips that led to the arrest, Bondi said. The investigation is, of course, ongoing. According to reports, this was merely a review of information the FBI already had, which means that potentially this individual could have been arrested if they are indeed responsible for planting these pipe bombs at the Democrat and Republican national headquarters in D.C. Could have been arrested years ago. That's just kind of the inference that you can make here. Interesting story, to say the least. Also in Washington, D.C., told you this week about Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, along with Congressman Tim Burchett, in their gambit to try to ban stock trading for members of Congress, and how they were basically met with a cold shoulder from the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, how he was allegedly playing games with Democrat leadership as well. Well, my favorite Congressman, Chip Roy of Texas, who is running for Texas Attorney General, he seems to think that Anna Paulina Luna's account of the situation is pretty much right on the money.
Trading ban.
Well, the American people do, so we need to get it done.
And do you feel an urgency from him? Well, you said time to act is now.
I'm not going to comment on that. I think I'm the old Messrs. Garcia article or whatever. I'm just going to get things done guy. So how we get it done, I don't know. I just want to wake up and it's done. So I'm not going to point fingers, but we're going to take the actions that are necessary to make sure that we get this done. I'm open to ideas on how best to do it, but I'm not open to ideas to water it down so that it has no impact. We got to get it done.
On NIL, would you support any legislation at this point?
So there's Congressman Chip Roy discussing the need to ban stock trading for members of Congress, saying the American people believe it needs to get done, so they need to get it done. We'll see where that goes. Not sure where that will be included in terms of legislation, but it seems to me that's kind of a slam dunk Nancy Pelosi a slam dunk issue really across the board. Would have no problem passing, and maybe that's why it's having problems even getting introduced. Let's go to this. Candace Owens called out the other day by Blake Neff, producer of the Charlie Kirk Show. We discussed that in passing yesterday. Blake Neff also invited Candace to come to TPUSA's headquarters in Phoenix to hash things out with various friends of Charlie. They're going to be doing a live stream where they are going to be addressing some of the various claims that Candace, just the backcrap, crazy claims that Candace Owens has made about the circumstances surrounding the martyrdom of Charlie Kirk. Candace Owens says she's not joining them, and here's why.
So Turning Point issued an ultimatum, an invitation, gave me 24 hours to respond to a tweet that they sent at midnight. Very strange. Again, everything just seems to be very strange and unnecessary that is coming out of Turning Point USA.
We're going to find out. You can pick the place. You can pick the time. I say we do it tomorrow. We don't need to plan for this. We don't need lawyers in between us, lawyer statements. It's not how I roll, okay?
So what you just heard there is a back-to-back clip. Candace Owens seemingly confused, befuddled, that Turning Point USA would call her out for a debate or to join them to discuss some of the accusations she's made about the circumstances and figures, friends of Charlie Kirk. That was after they invited her. The day before, what you just heard, was the day before when she says, anytime, anywhere, I'd be happy to hash these out. Hash these things out. Anytime, anywhere. Just hit me up. Day later, they actually extend that invitation. I can't believe they're doing this. Can't believe they're doing this.
We are going to discuss that. Plus, I have an amazingly odd update regarding the Egyptian planes, and it feels very significant.
And here we are with the Egyptian planes. Good Lord. So she's not going to be joining this live stream where they address many of the claims without evidence that she has made regarding the topic at hand. This might be the most intellectually congruent thing that she has done in the last 3 months. If you truly believe that members of Turning Point USA, including friends close to Charlie Kirk, were responsible for Charlie Kirk's assassination, why in the world would you go to their home turf? You even believe there's a target on your back, Candace Owens. Why in the world would you go to Phoenix and make it easy for them? That's the most intellectually congruent thing she has done for a while. CNBC reporting the national median rent just fell for the 4th straight month. National median rent for apartments fell 1% in November from October. It now stands at $1,367, according to apartmentlist.com. National multifamily vacancy rate was 7.2% in November. That's a record high. So falling rental rates, that's a good thing. According to Scott Turner at Housing and Urban Development, 6 months of 0 illegals released into our country, 2 million illegals removed, rents dropped for the 4th straight month. Coincidence? I think not. I'll give him a W on that. Now here's this. To wrap up a Friday 5-pack, I'm going to be watching over Christmas break that new it's not an Amazon documentary, but it's on Amazon called Age of Disclosure, regarding the topic of whether or not the government actually knows. What do they know about supposed non-human intelligence, extraterrestrial life, and so on and so forth. The reason I was interested in this is because there are a number in the trailers. In the trailers, there are a number of politicians, currently serving politicians, who are interviewed for this documentary. And it makes it sound like in that trailer, in the trailers for Age of Disclosure, it makes it sound like they totally believe the government is in possession of crafts of unknown intelligent origins. Well, on Fox News, Marco Rubio was asked point blank, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, he was featured in this documentary that I have yet to watch. He was asked point blank whether or not he believes some of the claims contained within this documentary, Age of Disclosure. Listen to his response.
But I've got to ask you, there's a show that's come out. It's called The Age of Disclosure. Yeah. Okay, I know everyone probably, right? Everyone asks you about it? Sure. It's a new documentary. We had repeated instances of something operating in the airspace over restricted nuclear facilities. It's not ours, and presidents operate on a need-to-know basis. Yeah. Okay, that is... So a couple points on it. First of all, I'm not disavowing that. It was an interview that was done almost maybe 3 or 4 years ago when I was in the Senate. Right. So it wasn't recent. The second point I would make, I was describing the allegations that people have come forward with. I had people that came forward to us. You know, some of these people were Navy pilots, admirals, generals, whatever, that would come forward and say, that there were programs in the U.S. government that not even presidents were made aware of. So I was describing what people had said to me, not things that I have firsthand knowledge of in that regard. A little bit of selective editing, but it's okay because, you know, you're trying to sell a show there. But the fundamental comments, I haven't seen it, but the clips I've seen and people have shown me are fundamentally true. And that is, there are things, we know this has been documented. There have been things that fly over the airspace, restricted airspace, be it where we're conducting military exercises or the like, and everyone in the government says they're not ours. And so what I worry most about, just me personally, is that some adversary, another country, for example, has developed some asymmetric capability for surveillance or the like that we just are not prepared for. You know, we're looking for missiles and fighter jets, and they're coming at us with drones and balloons. Yeah. I remember, you know, when NORAD turned on the radars and started looking for balloons, all of a sudden they spotted a bunch of balloons flying overhead. 90% of them were innocent, you know, things.
A couple of them were Chinese. And so, but we never look for balloons because our radars aren't trained for that. So that really was the point I was trying to drive at. I can't comment on the rest of the documentary. It has, as I said, claims from people that were former admirals, naval fighters, people with high clearances in government. Some of them are pretty spectacular claims. I'm not calling these people liars. I don't have independent knowledge that what they're saying is true. Mm-hmm. The one observation I had is we had people that did very important jobs in the U.S. government who are saying these things. So we have people with very high jobs in the U.S. government that are either A, liars, B, crazy, or C, telling the truth. And two of those three options are not good. But I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer. I don't have any point of, I don't want to call them liars. I just don't have any independent way to verify everything they said.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio discussing the documentary he was interviewed for while he was a sitting U.S. Senator called The Age of Disclosure. It's on Amazon. I fully intend to watch this over Christmas break. It was very much a I can neither confirm nor deny type of act until the very end, where he basically threw cold water on any notion, well, not any notion, but 2 out of 3 notions that what the claims of the documentary are could be true. He said 2 of the 3 possibilities are liars or crazy. I thought that was an interesting commentary because there has been much made about this documentary. When we come back, it'll be your turn to ask or tell me anything. It's coming up next. Back for one final segment this week on the AM Update. It's Ask or Tell Me Anything. You can ask me any question you want, tell me any news story you think needs covered. A lot of tells this week on the tell portion of Ask or Tell Me Anything. Let's go to this one. Could not believe this story when I first saw it. Meant to put it in the rundown a couple of weeks ago. Schedules got crossed, and so it's been sitting on the cutting floor for a while. Thanks to Evan for reminding me of this. The Maine Supreme Judicial Court is weighing whether a lower court overstepped constitutional limits when it barred a mother from taking her 12-year-old daughter to church services and restricted her from exposing the child to Bible teachings. This is a story at Newsweek. Let me just read that preamble over again. The Maine Supreme Judicial Court is weighing whether a lower court overstepped its constitutional limits when it barred a mother from taking her 12-year-old daughter to church services and restricted her from exposing the child to Bible teaching. The Maine Supreme Judicial Court is weighing. Spoiler alert. Yeah, that lower court definitely overstepped its bounds. The case, Bickford v. Braden, has drawn attention for its unusual scope and the broader questions it raises about parental rights, judicial neutrality towards religion, and the evidentiary standards used in family law disputes. At the center of the case is an unusually sweeping custody order that barred a Maine mother from taking her 12-year-old daughter to church or exposing her to Bible teachings, restrictions the mother argues violate her constitutional rights and exceed the authority of family courts. The state's high court must now determine whether judges can curtail a fit parent's religious practices based on the findings of potential psychological harm, a question that could reshape how courts nationwide weigh parental rights, religious freedom, and expert testimony in custody disputes. Now, we could go into the details here, but this is pretty obvious on the face of it what this is. This is a camel's nose under the tent of trying to get it on precedent somewhere, whether it's Maine or Massachusetts, whether it's Portland or Philadelphia, get it on the books somewhere, even if it's struck down in a higher court. Get it somewhere where a court says, yes, you can restrict parents from exposing children to church services and Bible teaching. That's what all this is about. Would not surprise me if we saw this case go eventually somehow, some way, some variation of this case to the Supreme Court very soon. Just an unbelievable case. Some family court in Maine trying to get a mother to stop taking her 12-year-old daughter to church or exposing the daughter to Bible teaching. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. So let's go to this one. Light the Dark says, what's your view on the flood? Was it a literal global event covering the entire planet, or was it a local covenantal judgment described with global language like many Old Testament prophecies? And how should Christians think about the theological purpose of the flood either way? So I believe it was a literal global event covering the entire planet. I just think there's too much evidence of a flood event from Tibet to Tenochtitlan. I think I said that correctly. Maybe, probably not. So just too many evidences across the globe that suggest a global event around the same time. A global flood event around the same time. So I do believe it was a global flood. So I do, that's kind of how I've always read that, always been taught that as well. And I think we are talking prophecies and the oral tradition by which the flood story, the flood narrative was passed down. I don't think those things should be conflated. And I don't think that's what you're doing, Light the Dark. But you said, like many Old Testament prophecies, covenantal judgment described with global language. Well, we're talking about an oral recount of the narrative of the flood versus Old Testament prophecies. Those are two different genres, and so I don't think we should necessarily be comparing those two things. How should Christians think about the theological purpose of the flood either way? Well, I think the ultimate takeaway from the flood is that God, even in his justice, even in his judgment, God is extremely merciful. I mean, the Bible says God regretted that he had made man. That's how terrible the condition of mankind on the earth had become. By all accounts and by all rights, God could have wiped everyone out. But in his great mercy, he allowed mankind to continue. And even in his even greater mercy, after the flood was over, he made a covenant with us, with mankind, that he would never do the same thing again. So, despite the fact that, yes, this is God's judgment, this was a great act of mercy from God, the flood. Now, it's interesting you asked me that question. You did not ask anything about where I'm going to go next. You'll recall, and I've shared this individual's work before, even on the very issue at hand that I'm about to describe in a different context. But you'll recall Ethical Skeptic. She is the researcher extraordinaire. Did some really fantastic work during COVID. And they've since moved on to developing a hypothesis called the ecto theory. Now, I call it a hypothesis. Ethical Skeptic calls it an ecto theory. And I'm not going to be able to pronounce. It's ECDO. It's a ecto. It's an acronym for something else. Let me see if I can actually find the. It's exothermic core and then DO. I can't. It's some Russian name. Yes, the Zhanbenekov oscillation theory. So exothermic core mantle decoupling, Zhanbenekov oscillation theory. Basically, and I'm not going to be able to sum up all of the details in here. Basically, Ethical Skeptic, from what I can read, thinks that there's going to be another flood. Now, they've tried to, those who kind of subscribe to this theory, I call it a hypothesis, those who subscribe to this theory, and there's a lot of interesting reasons for why they do believe that, and I think one of the tangents of the ecto theory, or ecto hypothesis, actually does a really good job of explaining global warming to the extent that it exists at all. It does a good job, maybe more precisely, of explaining ocean temperatures, that the core of the planet is always going through these phases where it's warming up, cooling down over hundreds of years. And of course, that affects the temperatures of the ocean, so what have you. But one of the conclusions of the ecto theory is that there's going to be another global flood, that the Earth will start spinning the opposite direction. And the more I've looked into this, the more it seems to me to be a violation of the Noahic covenant. There's no version of the earth spinning the opposite direction. I think that's part of what this is. Maybe some people who have glommed onto this to kind of believe in another doomsday scenario, maybe they've kind of polluted the waters. But I don't think that's going to happen again. You may have seen Ethical Skeptic talking about this. He or she speaks in riddles. It's difficult to understand what they're talking about. They do that on purpose to kind of filter out the censors. So that's just a tangent, light the dark, that you did not ask for, but that I went down, I tismed out on recently. Cypher's Bliss says, since COVID, a lot of scandalous conspiratorial issues have been on the table that were dismissed in the past. What are some of yours, and what are some others that you believe will never be worth considering? I'm now open to government allowing events, not orchestrating them. You know, I kicked the tires a little bit about 9/11. I'm not convinced that there was much of a conspiracy. Now, you might say that this falls into allowing events. That's a huge risk, though. That's a huge risk, even if you're the deep state. Allowing 3,000 Americans to die, that's just a huge risk for whatever you were trying to accomplish, whether that was the Patriot Act or what have you. I do firmly believe right now that Richard Nixon was done dirty. Absolutely done dirty. He was, maybe, I don't even want to call it unethical, but I think he was framed on some level. But he was railroaded. I do believe that. That was maybe the first instance of the true deep state, whatever you want to call it, the entrenched bureaucracy, getting its way. I have always been fascinated with the notion that oil coming out of the earth is actually a replenishing material, a byproduct of natural processes inside of the planet. And that means that peak oil theory is just a complete and total bunk story. I think I believe that a little bit more. Less evidence. That's just something more. It fits into the worldview of the climate crazies. Of course, we're going to make up an explanation for why we have to give up all of our freedom, all of our cheap and abundant energy. It's because we're going to run out of oil anyway. So, of course, you got to give us all the power. So, those are just a few things that kind of popped in my head. I just think, regardless, I think you should entertain and ask any questions and try to find the best answers you can. But ultimately, you have to use discernment. And I think too many people ask too many questions and don't use much discernment if they get any answers at all, which increasingly seems like there are fewer and fewer people trying to provide some answers. Let's go to this. Vanessa Wills says, my health insurance premiums, my portion through my employer, are increasing by $300 per month for myself and my 2 daughters. My company explored multiple alternative carriers to try to offset the increase, but every option came back even higher than our current provider. To help absorb the hit, my employer is even increasing the portion they cover. With open enrollment underway across the country, employees and employers everywhere are facing the same steep hikes. If nothing is done, we're going to get crushed in the midterms. The only thing that can really be done, Vanessa, in the meantime, is to extend subsidies. Now, I'm not sure if you're talking about the marketplace. It sounds like you get your health insurance through your employer. I do Samaritan's Ministries. My family does Samaritan's Ministries, and I'll just tell you that Samaritan's itself, that's health sharing, that's gone up significantly in the year and a half that we've had it. So it's going up for everybody, regardless. Probably even more if you're going through the Obamacare fake exchange. So I'm sorry, but yeah, you're right. The cost of healthcare, health insurance, just obscene. John says, is it time or helpful, we'll end with this, to replace the term furry and use bestiality in its place, or another term, but not accepting theirs? I think this has been beneficial for abortions to baby murder. John, yes. No longer going to be saying furry, a furry fetish. We're going to be saying those with a passion for bestiality. or those who engage in bestiality. I think that's appropriate. Anyway, happy Friday. Hope you have a good rest of your day. Great weekends. Be back at it again on Monday.